University of Curaçao here in the aula where we are at day 2 of Tourism and Leisure Studies, the 10th edition of this conference. Hospitality the Caribbean Way, Global Lessons from Local Experiences. Wow. We've had a wonderful day yesterday where we discussed many of the propositions from our visitors talking about how tourism and leisure or leisure, depending on which church you pray at, you experiences we've seen from local communities that make it onto global stages. It's also very nice to see that of the researchers, those that reside abroad have done research about Curaçao, which doesn't typically happen when we have our conferences. We're very happy to have this conference also highlight these lessons. And one of the elements that we're having today is our field day, where we take that knowledge and we go to the field and we explore, we take notice, and we make our field notes, and we come back tomorrow for workshops and policy, which is the point we wanted to get to with this conference, that we learn also from this experience so that we can take decisions to make tourism and leisure sustainable on the island of Curaçao, for the island of Curaçao, and especially by the island of Curaçao, because that's also a question that came up yesterday. Today's research question can be summarized in 3 words. What is progress? What is progress? I think that came out yesterday quite clear, is that in some views, progress is seeing more concrete and construction. Once we have concrete and construction, we realize that we don't get the output we desired. And then we start wanting something else or identifying progress in other indicators. And this is an important thing because sometimes before we pour concrete, we can modify and make concrete work for us. Progress is also, and mostly, social. Communities have to deal with movement of people. Tourism is one form, or visitors are moving around within the space. And how do we make sure that both enjoy the process? I think if we look at what's happening in Barcelona right now, particularly in Canarias, we can take notice that visitors, not that they're not welcome, but the outcome of their visit is not really appreciated by the local community. And Curaçao, on the road to receiving more tourists every year, we are asking this question before it becomes a problem. We are asking ourselves this question so that we can design a new future where tourism is really done sustainably. So it's not just about construction and concrete, but mostly about the people. It was last year, the Ministry of Economic Development, which is a partner in this conference, has initiated a carrying capacity study. Carrying capacity study is very important because as a small land mass, we need to be very, very, very wary of how we utilize what we have and repurpose what we cannot move. As you know, most of what we have is immovable objects. But then again, we have questions like Plaza Hotel, this big towering building that we're considering demolishing to build something new, more sustainable, to include other polities that have been ignored in the previous construction. Many questions, all sub-questions to the main one, which is what is progress? Today's panel, we will have 2 presentations and a discussion. We have wonderful people that have experience with this topic. 3 of them are local. 1 of them is an adopted visitor who has gone very deep in the community to find out how carrying capacity is perceived and how we should interpret things that we see and how we should plan based on what we have seen. First, we have my colleague, Dr. Dino Daal. Dr. Dino Daal is the research coordinator for the program International Hospitality and Tourism Management here at the School of Business. On his left-hand side, you have Mr. Muryad. Muryad is also representing CTB, a partner in the organization. Muryad is the CEO of Curaçao Tourist Board. We're very happy that your busy schedule this week still facilitates this, because this is really a question that they struggle with. Well, not struggle, but they handle with on a daily basis, right? We also have Ms. Amy Victorina, archaeologist from the National Anthropological and Archaeology Memory Management. I'm sure I made a mistake somewhere there, but I don't use those words that often. My apologies. Amy does many of the pre-investigations of the spaces where they do construction, and currently involved with a very important water project. As we talked about yesterday, fresh water is becoming a challenge in many spaces where you have carrying capacity issues. So we would like to hear some more of that and those interjections during the presentation. And we have Seleni Matus, who is the lead investigator for the carrying capacity study that was written out by the Ministry of Economic Development. She is from Washington, D.C., and has extensive experience in the field. So I guess you can conclude that with this panel, we will be one step closer to answering the question, what is progress? And it is a wonderful foundation for us to go into the field later on today. Okay, so and obviously I will be fulfilling the role of making sure that everything sticks together so that the question gets answered. You know, it doesn't have to end up like a graduate program, graduate thesis that, oh, did I really answer the research question at the end of the day? So my job is very important to make sure that we get out of this conference what we set out, the closest what we set out to do. And if I am a little bit sharp with time or directing questions, my apologies. I really am passionate to have an answer to this question. So I take my assignment today very, very seriously. Without further ado, I would like to render the floor to our first speaker, which is Dr. Dino Daal. Dino, the floor is yours.
Can I see my presentation? Yes. Bon dia. In the meantime, probably most of you visitors have become acquainted with our first word in the morning. Good morning to everybody. My colleague panels and the audience at large, moderator, and also Seleni. Good morning. My presentation is about the sustainable tourism development and carrying capacity for Curaçao as a small island development state. May I compliment the moderator in the sense that it's not only Ministry of Economic Affairs, but it's Ministry of Economic Affairs along with Tourist Board, and my person as the implementation manager of the Strategic Tourism Destination Development Plan. Can we go for the next one? Or should I press it? Oh, okay. Yes, as you have heard, perhaps yesterday, by one or two of the speakers, Curaçao has experienced impressive growth of its tourism sector. Our economy has shifted from to a diverse range of sectors, which in the past consisted of, I don't see my plate here, but I'll use my spectacles. Yes, so it has shifted from having a diverse range of sectors to a tourism-led growth model. Some even call it a real estate tourism development model. Central Bank has made an interesting analysis, and it showed that during the past 20 years, our economy have experienced a structural transformation. Through the years, our economy was more diversified, having key pillars such as the refinery, the international financial services, and trade, particularly the free zone, alongside the tourism sector. However, the contributions from international financial services, foreign exchange from the season have declined. You can see on the map, on the sheet, that the financial services has experienced a dramatic decrease from 18 to 3. The financial services also from, the financial services from 18 to 3. The refining activities has declined or disappeared entirely. So throughout the years, tourism has emerged as an increasingly dominant source of foreign exchange income, accounting for about 50% of foreign exchange receipts from exports in 2022. Now, tourism-related construction activity has expanded, which is also reflected in the strong mortgage lending. And in fact, the central bank found a strong correlation between the number of visitor nights and the real GDP. Next. So over the past few years, as I mentioned before, we have experienced impressive growth. Similar to other Caribbean islands, Curaçao has also rebounded swiftly after COVID-19, reaching a record of almost 490,000 overnight arrivals in 2022. And this number, as you can see in the sheet, rose to about 700,000 in 2024, surpassing the government's target for 2025. The Curaçao Tourist Board new target for this year is 765, and even that is amenable to change. The cruise sector, as I have to say, also experienced significant growth and has fully recovered from the pandemic. In fact, in 2024, cruise markets set a new record with about 835,000 cruise passengers. Next. Tourism's contribution to GDP, to Curaçao's GDP, rose significantly from 8.1% in 2005 to 24.4% in 2022. Quite an increase. Based on central bank calculations, this amounted to about 1.3 billion guilders, which is equivalent to about $726 million. Though adjusting for a 30.8% leakage would increase the share to roughly 40%. Okay? Another economic indicator, in fact an interesting one, the total economic impact of the tourism sector, that one increased by 42% from 2019 to 2023. So again, an impressive growth in terms of another economic indicator. According to figures from the Tourist Board, Curaçao's tourism sector experienced a 40% growth in its direct economic impact, rising from $744 million in 2019 to about $1 billion in 2023. The indirect impact increased 38.8% from $456 million to $633 million, while the total impact grew by 42.1% from $1.2 billion to $1.71 billion. Really impressive figures. This growth reflects a strong recovery from the pandemic's low point in 2020, when the total impact was merely $579 million. Okay? Tourism satellite accounts are not yet available for Curaçao. However, as a direct deliverable of the Strategic Tourism Destination Development Plan, a committee was instituted consisting of the Central Bank, the Bureau of Statistics, Ministry of Economic Affairs, CTB, and the implementation manager of the plan. And we are working to produce, as far as we can, a tourism satellite account by 2026. We try to encourage a more tourism, or a more data-driven aspect of our economy. When comparing the long-term slower pace, in terms of the compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, compound annual growth rate, Curaçao stayover visitors grew from 214,000 to about 700,000, which I just mentioned, from 1993 to 2024. Curaçao's stayover visitors, no, I'm sorry, with a compound annual growth rate of 3.9% during that period. Aruba grew from 600,000 to about 1.4 million with a 2.8 compound annual growth rate, and St. Martin from 300,000 to 395,000 by 2023 with a 0.9 compound annual growth rate. So you see what I alluded to. Curaçao grew relatively the fastest, followed by Aruba, and with St. Martin at a slower rate. Curaçao's tourism underwent, as a result, the fastest proportional growth and a robust recovery since 2022. The one of St. Martin was possibly constrained by hurricane vulnerability. Daal. Next. No, next one. So, why a carrying capacity study for Curaçao? Okay, I've listed about 5 reasons that I perceive the study was really necessary. I mean, the indicators speak for themselves, especially expressed in arrivals, both overnight as well as cruise. And this growth, this impressive growth, also supports new initiatives, projects, enterprises in hotels, dining, and restaurant. Also, it puts a pressure on our infrastructure and environment, from roads to utilities to waste disposal and waste treatment, all face increasing demand as visitors climb. In fact, we may already be experiencing potential overcrowding in high traffic areas, coupled with coastal and marine ecosystems stress. Equally, the visitor report positive experiences. While they report positive experiences, there is an uneven spread of tourism activity presents ongoing challenges for both travelers and the local population. Despite this positive satisfaction, still the heavy concentration of tourists on some popular tourist attractions, particularly the signature attractions, may lead to what we call congestion and diminished resident quality. We also have experienced crowding at popular beaches and historical attractions, also quality restaurants, and this we find that may lead to irritations of or erode the local enjoyment of our landmark attractions. The next one, ensuring fair access to attractions and embracing quality of life, level of utilities, infrastructure, and services. What we have found out, and we have experienced that for many years, that there's a lack of real-time visitor counts at attractions, at some of the attractions. Also, traffic flow data and the short-term rental inventories are still not present or thorough enough. And then the last one, promoting a broad and inclusive distribution of fruits and development, which is essential to maintaining a strong local support for tourism. At certain moments, we notice quite some discussions on on-island discrepancies in beach fees, increased overcrowding, traffic built up at public spaces, and rising real estate costs. The past few months, this has been discussion on local talk show, but also in the newspapers. And this may be an indication of mounting tensions between private sector interest and broader community interest. Now, before we continue, let's define the concept. And there you see that the United Nations World Tourism Organization uses certain keywords. So the maximum number of people, but also that at the same time, without it causing destruction of the physical, economic, social, cultural environment, and an acceptable decrease in the quality of visitor satisfaction. That's key in managing the carrying capacity. So, but this phenomenon is something that many other destinations also increases, the rapid growth of tourism and how to manage it sustainably. Next, in terms of small island tourism economies, I already alluded to some of the characteristics, but interestingly enough, you see the table whereby, as part of the carrying capacity study, the consultants have tried to calculate what we call the visitor-resident ratio. Now, I have to say that there is a, yeah, but I cannot, I will not finish. Okay. From 6.62 in 2015 to about 9.91 in 2024. So a lot of other indicators also point to potential overcrowding. Okay, as a result of the time, let me just quickly go to the last 2 or 3 sheets. Huh? Which one here? Doesn't go. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, so in terms of the status update of the carrying capacity study, as you see, we started about 4 to 5 months ago. We passed through phase 1 and phase 2, whereby the consultants did some on-site scoping, met some stakeholders, both public and private. And at the moment, we are in phase 3 with, last week, we did a validation workshop, and the consultants are trying to complete the final report by probably mid-July. The dimensions that the consultants highlighted in the study, as you can see there, 4 different dimensions of carrying capacity study. And in general, they went through 260 indicators, divided them into primary and secondary, and ultimately it was reduced to about 35. And for comparative purposes, Aruba has 21 and Seychelles 25. And just an interesting comparison for how other destinations are, what type of, let's say, measurements they are taking. It varies from visitor caps to, let me see, one moment. Yes, visitor fees, entry limits, and timed access to ease pressure on key sites. Very interesting. As a matter of fact, there is one from Barcelona, which also uses a measurement to have a control on the carrying capacity. They also use sometimes what we call dispersal strategies, which is regularly track key indicators. And this is the example that Barcelona uses to control the flow to the different attractions. So what can we learn? Some of the interesting comments that I have listed here, that since the expansion is transforming our economy, we need effective leadership, strategic planning, and coordinated stakeholder engagement, which in fact we already started to do. And we cannot do it, the tourism sector alone. It has to be within the context of the political, environmental, social, and economic, let's say, situation of the island, consulting, let's say, varying from the ministers and the private and public sectors. Also, in 2017, I did, as part of my dissertation, a study, you can call it a sentiment survey, and there, back then in 2017, the situation that we have now didn't exist, and the public at large generally voiced positive, let's say, comments on tourism. The situation in the meantime has changed completely, and so we need fresh insights to capture residents' current perspective, probably through a sentiment survey. Okay? Yes? Last slide, yes. So let's finish with this statement. Tourism must enrich the places we live in, not just the places as we visit. Unfortunately, I was not able to complete it. Thank you.
Well, Dino, most of the points you can still make them in the panel discussion later. So this is great to see that your presentation is so rich. I like the fact that you present the data because this is what we really need to convince people of certain things. Oftentimes we talk about feelings and emotions and how, I see something very local in my neighborhood that might not be the case in another neighborhood. And the truth is the average between the two. And you presented that, so thank you very much. Our next speaker, Seleni. Let me see. Yes, here we go. Her job is now to go beyond the numbers. Seleni is from the International Institute of Tourism Studies at George Washington University, and she has carried out the capacity study on the island of Curaçao alongside many other capacity studies in the region and beyond. And well, I would like to give you the floor, Seleni, because I'm curious to what you have to present. I think the room also, right? Yes, very good. Seleni, the room is ready for you. Beyond the numbers.
Wonderful. Good morning, and thank you so much, Guido, for that wonderful opening. Bon dia to everyone. It's such an honor to join you today virtually. I was just on island last week, so it feels like if I'm still there for a little bit. So greetings from Washington, D.C., and I'd really like to begin by thanking the University of Curaçao, also the Curaçao Tourism Board, the Ministry of Economic Development, of course, and all the other conference organizers for the kind invitation to be a part of this important conversation today. And also congrats on this being the 10th anniversary of this conference. I'm sure that there's been a lot of rich dialogue over the years. And as the island finds itself at this critical turning point, even more so. I love the question that was framed earlier by the moderator as sort of the overarching question for today, which is what defines progress, or in other words, how do we measure success? And so I'll be looking a little bit beyond the numbers and really going deeper on one element of the four sort of areas of carrying capacity that Dino shared on his during his presentation. So I'd like to maybe just start by recognizing that around the world, many destinations, not just those in the Caribbean, of course, are even more vulnerable to the changes that are occurring because we're small island developing states. Being from the Caribbean myself, I recognize and appreciate this, this urgency to act because we're all seeing the changes occurring in our destinations. So many destinations face growing risks tied to tourism's growth. We've heard, some of the data already sort of shared, which hopefully brings home this reality. There are many enabling factors, of course, that once helped our destinations to thrive, such as improved connectivity. There's more and more people having access to the internet and cell phones. We've seen this explode in recent years, rising incomes overall, and also the global marketing reach has expanded to places that are far-flung and that we, never considered. When you'd ask maybe an American visitor, have you heard about Belize, which is where I'm from? Maybe 2 decades ago, they'd say, where? And now, you say Belize and everyone's like, oh, Belize. And you could say the same about Curaçao as well, at least with the US market, the explosion that has occurred there. So that global marketing reach and the work that CTB and others have been doing over the years has paid off, right? Now, without careful management, all these factors that I just mentioned can lead to over tourism. And so when we think about carrying capacity, we think about, what is that threshold that, the community itself and that visitors and that the physical environment can maintain without affecting the integrity of experiences for nature, but also for residents and visitors. So let's take a look a little bit at these kind of growth factors that you see outlined on this diagram. So we know that over tourism doesn't arise accidentally, right? It is driven by a combination of agents of growth. We have technology, their power dynamics that shape the way that tourism develops, and this is quickly outpacing destinations' capacity to manage impacts. That's the reality. So let's break these down, right? So we have agents of growth. You see them here over on the left-hand side of the slide. There are more people that are traveling, and this rising affluence that I mentioned, the new groups of tourists entering the market, they add pressure to destinations. This creates a steadily growing demand that feeds visitor numbers. So the numbers keep growing up. And while this sounds good on the surface, it presents challenges at a deeper level. The way I look at this is imagine, you opening your home to visitors. So when you invite individuals to sort of come over to your home, you give them sort of a defined invitation time, right? You say, come over on Friday at 5 p.m. So, we could, shoot the breeze or have a few drinks or whatever that is, right? You're not opening your house the entire week for those for those visitors to come in whenever they choose, right? And this is a little bit of like what needs to happen because you need to prepare your home to be ready for your visitors. So it's in that preparing, that back of the house stuff that happens. We need to be ready. We need to be prepared to manage the growth. And that's not happening in all places, of course. So when we think of these enabling factors, we also look at technology, right? Advances in transportation, we have low cost carriers more and more all the time, cruise lines as well has sort of made travel much more accessible to a wide segment of US travelers. And this just makes travel cheaper, faster, and easier. Yeah. Again, fueling demand. Beyond sort of transportation, we also have social media and online promotional campaigns that are changing visitor behaviors, of course. They're inspiring new trips. You see your friends sort of post a trip about Bali in Indonesia and you want to go. And this also, all of this further accelerates growth. Power is also a very key dimension of tourism growth. And this refers to the imbalances in decision making. So, tourism is already a very fragmented industry. You have private sector sort of doing what it needs to do. They are, expanding hotels. They're maybe bringing new experiences online. Yeah, government is thinking of policies. And while there is coordination in many destinations, that coordination is not at the ideal level. And so there's a lot of siloed work. So there might be like a huge push by private sector to bring in like more hotel rooms. And then you have government trying to sort of keep up with the implications of, of just that, to bring in more people to fill those rooms, to be able to make specific sort of targets in occupancy rates, etc., to make those, to make the investments viable and to present returns over time. And so this presents like a very sort of tenuous situation over time. And the reality is that in most of our places, short-term growth mindset is what rules. our sort of political leaders are looking at these like shorter time frames for demonstrating changes and however tourism and success in tourism is defined, which is usually by growing numbers. This is primarily how we're defining success, and that needs to change. But as this shift occurs, okay, our leaders are still talking mainly about more and more growth in that way. So that short-term mindset is definitely and has definitely affected things. So I think it's important to note, that good win here we see in this first definition here reminds us that over tourism occurs when hosts or guests, that's us living in these places, feel that there's simply too many visitors, leading to unacceptable declines in our quality of life. We may be very affected by the traffic, for instance. It takes us more time to get to school, to get to work, leading to unacceptable declines in how we live life on a daily basis, or maybe a few days of the week, which is enough to get us frustrated. And these changes also affect the visitor experience. The visitor shows up at a beach which is overcrowded, and really sort of takes away maybe from the initial sort of perception that they had and expectations that they had for their experience in Curaçao or whatever destination we're talking about. Similarly, Milano Novelli, as we see in the second definition on this slide, describe the forced and permanent changes to residents' lifestyles, well-being, and access to amenities as a result of these pressures. So, for instance, in Curaçao, if you've loved to like get away to the beach, let's say during the week or on weekends, and on those days that you're showing up, there's a lot more visitors on that beach than you find residents, then this might just affect your experience as well. And so that access to amenities, whether it be the beaches or whether it be having to queue up or wait longer for service at a restaurant, all these things affect our quality of life. So what I'd like to focus on, my presentation focuses on what we call experiential carrying capacity. And this is the approach that looks beyond the sheer visitor numbers to focus on the quality of experience. This is both from a visitor standpoint and also a resident standpoint. This is one dimension of carrying capacity. Dino mentioned the other three as well. There's a physical side of things as another example, but I'm focused on that experiential. So this dimension is really about preserving the authenticity of place and local culture. It's about protecting community well-being, ensuring that visitors leave with a meaningful and high quality set of experiences from their time. So in Curaçao's case, this means being mindful about social carrying capacity, which is how tourism affects the social fabric and residents' tolerance for visitor numbers. It's also about the recreational carrying capacity, how many visitors can take part in activities before those experiences diminish in quality, like people might feel overcrowded. Psychological carrying capacity as well. This is when crowding begins to diminish comfort and enjoyment. And then cultural carrying capacity, how much tourism can occur before eroding the rich and cultural identity, or identities, I should say, of all the communities that make up Curaçao. So these are some of the subdimensions under experiential carrying capacity. So let's talk about this a little bit more. I want to sort of zoom in here. I know that Dino, in his slides originally, I know he didn't get through all of them. There was a slide focused on tourism area life cycle, and that's the top stage that you see there.
Seleni?
Hi, Guido. Am I over time?
You have 2 more minutes.
Okay, great. So we see here that over-tourism can occur in 2 cases, where there is, you don't need to be overdeveloped in terms of rooms to like have over-tourism occur. You could be underdeveloped and have a moderate level of visitation, but because you are still growing and don't have all the policies in place, and the organizing around that, there may still be over tourism occurring. So I think that's important to note, and this is what that slide does. So there are many frameworks, or I should say many, there are a few key frameworks that destinations have to sort of help them manage carrying capacity. The Global Sustainable Tourism Council has a set of criteria and indicators, a standard that it's called, that really sort of sets guidelines for destinations around visitor management. And you see here on the right hand side some of the guidance that they have in that sort of set of that standard itself that really recommends that destinations, for instance, look at how they're managing visitor volumes and activities, especially in cultural sites, but then also in natural sites. And then there's also sort of guidelines for how it is that visitors should or should not interact with wildlife. And so these are some examples of many other, guidance and criteria outlined in that set of guidelines for destinations. So Dino mentioned this already. One of the ways, you can't manage anything if you're not monitoring and measuring it first. So there are some key indicators that we use to really give us a sense, for instance, of what that interaction is and the intensity of tourism on like in a destination or within a specific area. And you see here that we're using visitor to resident ratios. This looks at how many visitors versus how many residents there are and provides this ratio. Another way of measuring this as well is really looking at the number of visitors per square kilometer. That gives us a sense of how intense or how dispersed tourism is in an area. And we also can take a look at this by looking at how many hotel rooms there are by 100 residents. So you see the baseline data here. All these mark and give us some sense of tourism intensity. So one of the things that we did as part of this carrying capacity study conducted for Curaçao is to analyze online travel reviews. This is a way to learn more about what travelers are saying beyond whether they're just happy or not with experiences. A lot of times they leave very important clues about what the experience, like the areas where there may be shortfalls and areas for improvement, especially related to management of attractions and sites. So we looked at 25 attractions. You see them here across all these categories. We then analyzed over 1,000 reviews against this framework here. You see the topics, very broad. We looked at amenities, environment, and also the experiences. I want to zoom in on one thing under environment. You'll see there crowding. That's a very important one and a very important measure. So we looked over 1,000, we analyzed over 1,000 reviews. Overall, positive sentiment is declining between 2018, because we looked at nearly 1,000 reviews in 2018 and 2024. We wanted to see that difference between pre-COVID and post-COVID. And you'll see here, and this is my last sort of slide, so hopefully I'm on time here, that overcrowding, if you take a look, so frequency of mentions, anything above 10% was considered a topic that was significant. And so all these are in bold. So all those topics that are in bold are those that are above 10%. And then in terms of positive sentiment, anything below 75% was considered as an area of improvement. We need to get positive sentiment up to 75%. So we can see that visitors are already in 2018, if you look at overcrowding, 13% of all the 800 plus reviews that we analyzed mentioned overcrowding. And by 2024, that had risen to 17%. Positive sentiment for overcrowding in 2018 was 45. So that's not good sentiment. Like they're basically expressing negative views about like crowding. And in 2024, that had even gone down. And so we can see here and use this tool to give you sort of a better sense of what visitors are saying beyond whether they're just happy or not about their experiences. So this snapshot hopefully gives you a sense of that there are opportunities. This is way beyond Curaçao. This is for all destinations in the Caribbean. There are opportunities to strengthen proactive site management, to incorporate better monitoring around experiential carrying capacity indicators like the ones that I mentioned. And all of this, may be focused on, this overarching question that the moderator posed of like, how do we define progress? And quality and quantity are two key aspects that I want you to take from this presentation into your field work and hopefully then reflect on how these dimensions might affect the response to that question that the moderator posed. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Mashadanki.
Thank you very much, Seleni. This is a beautiful picture painted of how within the frames of comparison we measure up, and it is nice to see qualitative data being interpreted for policy. Now, I'm very curious. I want to throw, as they say, a wrench in the glass house. I want to go over to Amy. Amy, you run a project on water, and it was a conversation about development, the archaeological value, the heritage management, and the issue of possible agriculture that we are missing out because we are constructing in places where we corrupt our own water resources that poses a threat. Yesterday we heard that agriculture, local agriculture, is a way for us to be more sustainable. So we are actually hurting ourselves at one point. Is this what I should understand? If you can give us your professional insight and maybe a little bit of background on the project as well, so the audience is informed.
Yes. Oh, yeah, now. Okay. Good morning again. Thank you for the two presentations. They were very interesting. As an archaeologist, of course, the motto is look back to go forward. And I don't say go back, I say look back. We have to look back to see what our ancestors did and how they survived and what we can learn to go ahead. So in archaeology, we basically try to learn from the past or to figure out more what people did in the past that they could survive. We have the project that Guido is specifically talking about is called Agua para Curaçao, that is water for Curaçao. And in this project, we focus on water elements throughout the 5 centuries that, not 5 centuries, but almost 6,000 years that people have been living on the island. You look now at Curaçao and you see sometimes very gray island. You think, oh, it's so dry, we are semi-arid, and we are, but we are not like that just because this is how we've always been. Our biodiversity, or flora or fauna has changed a lot throughout the ages. And so has our water, our groundwater quality. And of course, the biggest problem in this is us humans. And it's not a problem that started today. This has started at the moment that the first group of people came to the island. And this is now one of the oldest information that we have dates to around 3,700 BC. And these people that came from Colombia and Venezuela, they came with new animals. They came with new fauna. And all of this, they brought to the island. So the change began from that moment. And then it was super accelerated when the Spanish came around 1499, because one of their biggest things that I did here was they cut a lot of different trees for different purposes. So there was a huge, the start of cutting a lot of trees will have effect on your water. And this became worse when the Dutch West India Company came here. So we're talking about hundreds of years that the biodiversity has been changed. And all of this, with what is happening, especially when the refinery also came, we have a problem with our groundwater. We in the 60s, a lot was bulldozered, even though nothing was built in the place. So we have affected our biodiversity, which is why now we have a problem with groundwater. Curaçao had, like the Spanish talk about pozos. We had springs. We had a lot of water sources, but maybe nowadays we have 2, 3 that we know of, but it's all been destroyed because we've taken so much of the groundwater and it never had a chance to level out, because if you keep cutting native plants, the native plants help with their roots to maintain water. And then we've also built a lot of dams, a lot of different things that change the waterways. We have changed our waterways so much that we have a problem with water now. I'm not a hydrologist, but from what I see from the past to now, we were destructive to our own water. And now we use a reverse of osmosis to get our water. Everybody that can afford water has water, but it keeps getting more expensive. If we, like Curaçao, what we want to do with this project, coming back to this project, is we want to look at the heritage elements, water elements that we used to use to live, and how we can incorporate that in newer developments, and where we place new developments, because we have a tendency that we are just building new constructions just because we need it. But we're using important areas that we can do agriculture on it, or where there is water, we are destroying just to build houses. And when there's a lot of rain, we get floodings. It's like we are perpetuating our problem. Instead of thinking of where do we place new construction, we do not look at that, because we think, we still get water from the tap, but we are destroying ourselves. There's a couple of projects that will be built in places with amazing soil to plant. Curaçao does not have a lot of natural soil forming, because we are removing every trees. So the soil cannot form. Soil needs to be formed. Over centuries it forms. But if we keep cutting and bulldozering and do everything, it will never regenerate. So this is again, I'm not a hydrologist or people that are in construction, but from what I see from the past, we are just repeating, we are just not looking at the past and just repeating things that we have done from the 20th century on that is not helping us. So it is, this is a problem, and there is not enough. I'm not going to say that there's no attention being given to it, but we need to focus more on this, I find personally. So and next to water, we're talking about water, but tourism is also pressure on heritage. Our heritage is being destroyed every day. All these beautiful hotels you see, they are on top of heritage. And most of the times they are just dug out and thrown away. And we do our best to work with the government to place us in permits, which they do, but it's not just, let's do a desk-based assessment and we're done. There is so much more steps in the process that has to be done that are not being done because of the authorities, and we cannot save our, there comes a moment that a lot of our heritage will be destroyed and we cannot do anything about it. But there are ways that we can do things about it. So we're in a constant battle trying to protect our heritage and our water by trying to create projects like this, having different stakeholders, and to let people learn more about our island, that we can do so much more when we're talking about carrying our own capacities. So.
Thank you, Amy. Just so for clarification, so Amy said placing in the permit. So this is a requirement that once you receive a permit for construction, you're required to invest to see if there's heritage in place, so that it allows the research. And the research is not just the desk research, but also material research and the typical digging that archaeologists are known for.
Yes, and the problem is the mindset of the authorities is, okay, we place you in the permits, you're in the permits. But of course, we're not in all the permits, because
How?
it's consciously not being done. You know,
Okay.
because we should be in all of them. Not that we have the capacity to do it, but we should be in all of them. But anyway, but it's a process. Archaeology is a process. Archaeology isn't just, oh, we know there's something somewhere and we go and dig. You have to do preliminary research, and that's a desk-based assessment. We go into the archives, we look at history, archaeology, oral traditions of the island, we incorporate everything in it. And that's just the start. After that, we would know which methods we should use, or even if it's necessary to do further research. And that is like physical search in the field. And then, so after you do an inventarization first, and then you can do a full-fledged dig, that you go and remove everything, because you can only do a dig once, you remove stuff, and then they build their buildings. But they think, oh, you did a desk-based assessment, so you did something, so you're done. But we are far from done, and then they go on with the development, and then we lose the heritage anyways. So it is a weird vicious circle that we're in. Well, we do our best in what we can do, but it's difficult.
So this is an indeed cry for help, and I'm gonna point out to something that was very clear in Seleni's presentation, that the aspect of heritage and culture is one that scored the highest, if I'm not mistaken, in the assessment. So I want to gather all these challenges. I don't want to call them problems. All these challenges, and I want to place them in on the plate of Muryad, who's the one that has to direct this fleet of ships to battle for economic development, for social development, but for progress. Did we answer the question progress yet? I don't know. Muryad, the floor is yours.
I think, good morning, everybody. I think to be answering the question about progress, it's a process on itself. Progress takes time. To identify progress also takes time. And looking at all the different angles and what the definitions are for progress for everybody. I believe, hearing what Amy just said right now, it's a matter of balance. Balance what we have, not only on our physical assets. So you talk about ground, you talk about groundwater. But on the other side, we all talk about economic moving forward. It's about construction and all of that. It's about balance, and with balance comes identifying where to do what, and that's what we think we are on the road to. Of course, we've seen massive economic growth when it comes to tourism over the past years, especially over the past 3 years. But it's all about balance. We are one of the biggest islands when it comes to the ABCs. We are the biggest island when it comes to the former Netherlands Antilles. And it's about, balancing out what is important for the island, balancing out what is important for the people of the island. Because at one point you can say also, hey, let's look at the historical cultural heritage from the ground. But the other side, you'll ask yourselves, okay, people need to work, people need to eat, people need to prosper. It's all about balance. It's all about placing the right efforts in the right places when it comes to developing all these and having respect for all these subjects in all these fields, and try to, as much as possible, be harmonious with your actions when it comes to the island, when it comes to the destination, while respecting tourism growth or economic growth as such. Not only our industry, I'm talking about industries in general, because we also know that diversifying our economy is very, very important, not relying on one or two sole economic pillars, but in the process of that, respecting and taking into consideration all other fields that makes us, this island, a very unique and beautiful island for our people. So, like I mentioned, it's part of having that right balance. You will never have a right balance because all forces pull their way, but it is an art and us as leaders in this community to foster and work towards a better balance for what is economically beneficial for the island, but also keeping what we had and historically what we've built up on this point. And when it comes to the challenges that we have, for example, the water challenge, we have also a lot of more challenges. It's also how we as a community, and you put it on our plate from the tourist board side, but it is a national thing. It's a national challenge that we as a community and our island in its totality need to deal with, actually. If you look at from the tourism side, we know we have an X amount of people visiting our island every single year. Last year was 700,000. This year we're looking at 765,000, even more. And it's about how do we create together, handle these challenges with this growth, and that we can harmoniously, as people living in Curaçao, with the visitors that we invite to our island, to live good and a happy life, and everybody benefiting from that. And that's the key, finding that balance to an industry. I'm only talking about tourism, an industry, an economic industry being disruptive on the island, on what we have as our own island. So it's a work in progress. I must say from our side, we push this, we support, and we also in the part of leading together with the Ministry of Economic Development this carrying capacity, because this carrying capacity is not only about going to look at numbers to where and to how much, but in the how we are going to get there to the where and the how much. And putting this frontal forward to also our government, our ministries, because we talk about government and we talk about ministries, and one important part here is are the ministries that are the ones that needs to carry on and implement visions, implement and make work happen when it comes to these challenges. Because we easily can take a look at politicians and say, hey, they're not doing anything. We need to look at the whole spectrum of the public service and ministry. So it's a collective effort. Like I said, we as an industry from the tourism side, we are doing our part, but it's not something that we can do alone. It's something that we need to do as an island in its totality.
Thank you, Muryad. Yes. So many questions, many challenges, many opportunities also, and many futures. I would like to open the floor for questions. If you start thinking about your questions, a few runners will be around with microphones. Those online are also invited to ask questions. And this is, so we started with the main question, what is progress? maybe those of you that are visiting, out of this context, what sub-question can you develop at this moment for our panelists? Thinking about how what you've seen also by being on the island, that this is not just another island with beaches and sun, but apparently the history peaks in immensely when analyzing the reviews of the island. The experience, multicultural experience, which is quite unique, even for the Caribbean, which is unique in itself compared to other regions. Which aspects of progress should we give attention to? Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you for all your presentation. The first speaker mentioned compare 2020. Oops, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So thank you for your presentations. My question is for the first speaker who presented a number for 2020 versus 2022. Is it possible that your percentage, there is a bias because of the COVID effect? Because you pass from 25% to 50% of tourism. Is it real, or is it because of the COVID effect?
Actually, to my understanding, it's real. And the COVID has, to some extent, affected the data in the sense that you are right in a particular way, because there was a dent in the overall development of the figures. But the way that we calculated this, if I'm not mistaken, so far as I could check, it's real. Yes?
Thank you very much. Yes, Ilya.
Hi, thank you all for your very interesting and enlightening presentations. I have a question. I have noticed on the island that tourism is quite concentrated in certain areas, and yeah, you hear a lot when people discuss over tourism that spreading more would be a good option. But my institute where I work, Daal University, has also been involved in that study that you referenced on over tourism by Minali and Cheer. And since then, they've done some more studies, and they also found out that sometimes spreading of tourists does not solve the problem, but can make it bigger. Especially for, maybe from the perspective of the tourist, it could be, yeah, it's nice to come in more quiet areas, but from local perspectives, it's often not a solution, and it puts more strain on areas that that were more. So I was just wondering what your view is on that more localized, tourism, and what your view is on that.
Thank you for the question. It's about using your square kilometers effectively. We have destination management areas, and it comes also in our bigger plans. Of course, you have to zonify your island. You want to spread tourism, but because right now it's relatively concentrated, you want to spread it, but you don't want to spread it in, let's say, neighborhoods that people live in, for example. I just take an example right now, because that's not spreading. That's hiding actually a problem or creating a problem elsewhere. It's about identifying what are the tourism areas, and then from that part, help develop those areas much more efficiently, where tourists can also spread a little bit more. And at one point, you know that, okay, that's the capacity of that area. What are the infrastructural investments and socioeconomic investments you need to do in that area? And then you will create more areas. Right now, we have pressure points on certain areas, but the idea is looking at how big our island is, and then safeguarding our local community in where it's habitable and where are the part of having living schools, etc. You keep that spread around, but you still invite tourists to experience the whole island in its totality, because that's also part of our culture and heritage that you want to have for them to experience.
Yeah, thank you. And leisure, not just schools and living, but also the leisure.
Yeah, actually, to complement what Mr. Muryad brought forward, as part, as he said, of the destination development plan, we developed what we call destination management areas, about 8 of them. And then out of each destination management area, you have action area plans. And in these action area plans, what you try to do is to manage it sustainably in such a way that not only will the visitor experience the diversity of our product, but also you try to take into account one of the findings, at least initially, of the carrying capacity study. That is the concentration to certain attractions. So this plan is very detailed, and as we speak, we are working it out, not in the terms of the 8 destination management area, but the action area plans, and try to stimulate the visitor to visit the variety of attractions that we have, and not to concentrate in one or other area. So yes.
Before Seleni also wants to make a contribution to the question, yes?
Thank you so much, Guido. To add here, just 2 additional reflections. I think, as Dino has indicated, the study has very much identified, we didn't have the time to get into all those details, but it is very clear that for Curaçao, the overcrowding is primarily occurring on your beaches. So, this also gives you an opportunity to zoom in and address only those areas, where there are issues. But one of the second findings from the study as well is that, the overall sentiment and the topics discussed in relation to your cultural heritage, attractions, and sites is enormously positive. But there were far fewer reviews coming in, for cultural attractions and sites, which leads us to believe that there are opportunities for better directing visitors to these existing experiences. As part of the study, there were also 2 focus groups held with community leaders from throughout the island, not just those neighborhoods that are maybe, like Otrabanda and whatever, where that are closer into tourism. It was a very sort of wide cross-section of community leaders brought into these 2 focus groups. And there too, they identified the opportunities to develop more community-led and driven tourism, right? So that they too can benefit more from tourism in a direct manner, in a way that maybe is occurring but not sufficiently, and they'd love to see more of. They see opportunities in this area. So just thought I'd mention those 2 points.
Thank you, Seleni.
Thank you.
Ilya, yeah?
Yeah, that's
Gentlemen.
Okay, thank you for presentations. I have actually 2 questions. The one is, what about progress? Progress is, of course, also a mindset. I've worked for over the last 15 years within multinationals like Shell and Philips to create sustainable growth. That requires investment, also from a government perspective. And if I look to progress, there is always a conflict, I won't say, but sometimes will become the short-term thinking of the industries, profit. We talk now about the other 2, people and planet. For now, the sustainable development goals. There I'm teaching now students here to be more aligned with the 6 for Curaçao, which are the focus on for 2030. So, but I think I have a lot of examples on my mind. I always think in solutions, but the longer terms require investments now for over 5 years. it's all clear. A lot of tourists, a lot of buses, all need to be transport. Then we come to also the electricity, sustainability of clean energy. We have all the facilities here, sun and wind, but we don't see that lot of sun panels on the roofs. Okay, but that's another one. Jan Rothaus has in the green wing here, so I support Stella in that part. So progress has two dimensions. You have the short term, you want to make profit. There is profit for tourists, but at the same time, for the long term, and that we higher investment, not short thinking. I am also guiding students from the TU Delft, but if I see the thesis, it's most focused on, also important, Willemstad, to make it more, the environment better, cooler, what can we do for that? But that's all, I think, short term, within 1 or 3 years, but I think also long term, how can we transport the tourists, and they can more and more, over the island on a sustainable way. And everything looks about buses, etc. We can make them electric, but still it is buses. We get the Caracas by, everyone well known, it gets complicated. I see it already. But the point is thinking out of the box. If I think, hey, the only way is up, why not a monorail from the west to the east point, and then the tourists can go in that, and it is over the floor. The same I've seen for airports in Düsseldorf. I live for 18 years in Germany. A lot of sun panels on the roof. I had them already for 18 years. So try to get clean energy, but it's a mixture, and that's of course, I hear the word silos already, but silo, I think we need from a university perspective, and I've tried it with Erasmus and with Shell, an overarching faculty, because it's connecting with each other. You mentioned I'm not an expert in that part. So we have a lot of expert, a lot of knowledge. How can we connect that knowledge and bring it to the next level for sustainable solutions?
Thank you for the question. Who can, yes, Dino?
Yes, while I agree with you, and responding to Guido's question, I tend to think that a way of measuring whether we have progress or not is by using indicators. And both the destination development plan as well as the carrying capacity advocates use of indicators to be more data-driven on the 4 dimensions of the study. In the destination development plan, we also advocated the use of indicators. And so now we are going to use these indicators effectively to measure whether we can talk about progress and to what extent, and perhaps more importantly, what we need to do to correct a particular development that is not going according to how we want it to be. So instead of just talking about progress, I want to go more in the direction of using indicators to measure the extent of progress.
The use of indicators has been quite ample in the past 30 years for the Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals. How do we translate them to local initiatives? Because I want we have a very beautiful benefit by having tourists because we get volume for things that we could have not done before. But building a monorail, I'm going to use that example, building a monorail for tourists ignores the problem that it creates for the islander. No, I understand, but I want to be very clear that we always try to solve things because we see them, because the tourist is here, but these problems have been here before tourists have arrived, because as Amy indicated, every human that came to Curaçao is a tourist, some for far longer than others, and we've also had impact on the community. So how do we realize that we occupy a space and all of us need to benefit from the space, and the space needs to benefit back from this, because this is exactly what you mentioned, Stella van Rijn, our rector, and the Green Week. The entire point of this is the planetary health, and planetary health has a very important social component to it. So I just wanted to add that to the mix. Sorry to make it more difficult. So you were.
No, look, it's like I says, progress is also a process. That's how it is, and having a lot of ideas, a lot of thinking on what to look into and solve these challenges is very important. What Guido mentioned and taking in the example, looking at development of our island is not for the tourist, it's for our island, our inhabitants. What we do is invite tourists to come and enjoy. They stay around 9 to 13 days, and then they go back. But we in this room, particularly many of us in this room, live here 365 days. So the progress and the development should be primarily for us living here, so we can have a better quality of life, so we can enjoy and maintain, not only enjoy, maintain also our resources, and then having visitors come in and enjoy what we have to offer. That's the best part. But first is we need to develop our island for ourselves and then invite the people.
Yes.
Hi, I am right here. I am trying to maintain a level of professional chill. I live here, I live in West Punch specifically, and so these conversations about capacity are extremely interesting, and dispersion as well. We have tour buses coming into our neighborhood, but I rolled into Barber on fumes this morning because we don't have a gas station for 15 minutes, hoping it was going to be open, which it was, so I'm okay. But I feel like I could talk really at length with you, especially Muryad, but with everyone for a long time. But I want to really back up, especially before we go out today, to the definition of a carrying capacity so we understand really what we're talking about. And as you are all scholars, you may understand way better than I do, but I just want to make sure to address like what we are actually talking about in common language. And so you had put on the screen that carrying capacity is defined as a maximum number that has two components: destruction of many things and decrease in quality of visitor satisfaction. So there was a CTB sector presentation last week, and I believe it was Andre who said, yes, this carrying capacity, could establish a maximum number, but it's not like we're going to say after that number you can't come. So my first question is, what do we do with the result of finding out a maximum number if we do not, in fact, honor it? And also, when we are looking at two components of destruction versus decrease in quality for visitors, how do we balance that if we find there's a ton of destruction but not a huge decrease in quality? Do we let things go? Do we say we accept this balance, which I think is just means like acceptance of permanent loss that we can't uncover once we build on top of it? So yeah, my question is like, how do we break down the definition of this into what will end up being actionable on this island? Does that make sense?
Should I give that, or to let Seleni have a little bit more insights on that?
You were named by name, so I think you're the guy to beat.
Yeah, I know. But okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Seleni, you want to weigh in on that, or should I?
Happy to like start and frame this up, Muryad, and I think the study itself that's being conducted is very much action oriented. So I'd say to this there are a couple things. The word carrying capacity really developed from sort of site-based management. So it comes from the management of natural protected areas. The methodology that we're using is for the destination. And this should have been said maybe earlier, that there are very few destinations that have embraced a destination-wide approach to carrying capacity. It's much easier, right, to say, okay, for this, like let's say Chateboca National Park, for instance, like here are the problems, here's what we're going to do. In a dynamic system, which is what a destination is, with many stakeholders, there's a lot going on. So it all starts with those indicators that the community feels are most important to keep track of, because if we're keeping track of those indicators, we're understanding what the changes are that are occurring over time. Now, carrying capacity is more than just a number. Like Muryad mentioned, progress is a process. And I would say carrying capacity is a process. So what we've done through this process is define thresholds that the community, I use the community very broadly here. I should say that tourism stakeholders, including community leaders that came into these discussions, we were just there last week, we've presented that set of 31 indicators that cuts across, it's way beyond just the economic impacts of tourism, looking at some of these like tourism intensity indicators, but there are others, for instance, 31 indicators. And for each of these indicators, we've defined a threshold, not a specific, a threshold of acceptable change, yeah? And then we've looked at global benchmarks that give us a sense of like, okay, after what is the level, what are what is that sort of level after which we know that we are in the danger zone, right? Or like we've exceeded sort of capacity. And so we've looked, and the research has, for these 31 indicators, defined what those like thresholds might be based on experiences in other places. And some of these indicators, we've set the thresholds with input that came from the discussions last week. So for those that we could do based on research, we did. But there was a subset of these 31 indicators, which we discussed at great length last week in smaller groups and got input. And that then is helping to define what the threshold is. So, it's really hard to manage a number, and we're beyond that. So it's really defining thresholds of acceptable change. And you've mentioned some of this language in your question. So what is that sort of threshold of acceptable change? And then once we exceed that threshold, this plan also defines what needs to be done. So there are initiatives already for those indicators which are like maybe above that sort of ideal threshold, like what needs to be done. So there are a set of priority initiatives that are coming in this study as well. So it's more than a study, it's like an action plan that responds then to the indicators and those thresholds. I hope that helps. So it's indicators, defining the thresholds, and then setting initiatives in place to manage those indicators which have been exceeded or are close to being exceeded, so that those are managed as well. All about finding that balance, as Muryad mentioned.
Thank you, Seleni. Our next question comes from, yes, thank you.
Good morning again, everyone. Thank you for the phenomenal presentations. They were both interesting, as well as the comments from the other two panelists. I'm very happy. Let me just start by saying that I'm very happy to see that Seleni is indeed working with you. It means that there are loads of experiences across the Caribbean that she brings to this effort as well. But even as I comment there, my simple question, which is not so simple, comes back to how exactly are we defining two things here? Progress, and from whose perspective? And balance. I think that's the one that I'm finding the greatest level of tension. And I say this as a Jamaican, appreciating that if there's no water, there's no life. So let's start there. And secondly, most importantly, once you start to lose the culture and heritage of a place, where does tourism fit in? Because you're, in essence, destroying what makes that destination a destination to begin with. And I think this leads me to my more complicated question, which is to what extent are the destination action plans reflecting the desires of the community? And with community here, I'm speaking specifically not to the tourism stakeholders, because we know the power relationship embedded there. We're talking now about the local voices, the ones that are not normally engaged in the focus group discussions, the ones whose voices are usually heard only at the end. And I'll also like to see, when we talk about the balance, when we talk about the need for progress and creating job opportunities, etc., to what extent are those jobs real jobs, jobs that offer opportunity for solid growth and development among your population? And I think I'll just wrap this up by saying that, again, grateful for Seleni being on your team, but there are so many examples across the Caribbean. Use Jamaica. The two communities with the highest volume of tourism are also among the two with the greatest level of violence. I'll leave it right there.
First of all, go ahead. First of all,
a voice usually not heard in tourism, so I would like to give this opportunity first to Amy.
yeah, did it. Go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate your comment so much. I want to comment on the indicators that you guys are talking about. I have no idea what all those 31 indicators are, but
Flavors at Baskin Robbins.
31 flavors. In such settings, I have personally I have an issue with in general how things are run in certain things, because I hear tourism, I hear the CTV, I hear all of those things, and heritage is a very important part of it, but there's no way that people actually working with heritage are involved in these things. And we're talking about progress. Progress is not somebody, or in this case, the ones that deal with tourism, say, oh, this has to happen so that we can get a lot of tourism. There is so much more, and we're talking about assets. Heritage is a huge asset, but they are daily destroyed by ourselves, but by tourists also. We don't realize how fast this go. We have a lot of walking routes. People are walking all around the island. They are going through sites. They are destroying the sites. They're opening up ways to the sites. People are collecting stuff. People are walking, breaking historical walls. People are doing whatever they want to do. There is no talking as like the only local archaeologist on the island. There is no attention to heritage. It is such a great asset that we have. Curaçao's history is a global history. It's not for nothing that we all come out of the womb speaking 4 languages. It is very powerful. We do not exploit this in a good way. We need to, when we're talking about tourism, we do not only need to look at the economic aspects. It is important, but we have to look how the locals can also take a win out of it and showing themselves and protecting their heritage, their way of life. Because if we just sell out to tourism because it's something that we need, it will become violent. I appreciate your comments so much, and I think if we want to talk about progress, we have to include more people in these discussions. You want us to sell heritage? You have to come to the people that deal with the heritage. Because I'm sorry to say, government, other people, local people, a lot of people do not know that they're walking on heritage. It is crazy. It is crazy. And yeah, it's always, for me, it's always the same story. It is always the same story. But I do appreciate your comment because you talk more about locals and work for them, financial beneficial for themselves too. But I focus on the heritage, which eventually will give the locals also power. So thank you very much.
Yes. Adding to the research question, what is progress of heritage? Parentheses, because that's an important element. Muryad.
Yes. Thank you for your passion. Let's start on that. Thank you for your passion, and then thank you for our Jamaican visitors for your valuable insights. Looking at the community in its totality, not only to the carrying capacity, not only to what we're doing right now as a plan. We must say that last year we did consult the island, we did consult the people, and that resulted in a very beautiful, let's say, body that's called the ministerial body. That we did 5 conferences last year that we didn't look at the usual suspects of tourism. We didn't look at the usual, investors, hotels, and all of that, and stakeholders. We looked at the community leaders from all different areas and stakeholders to define, especially this when it comes to our authenticity, our diversity, and how and what do people want to see and what do people want to know. And from that came, we talk about indicators in this part. The carrying capacity will talk about indicators and thresholds and how you manage thresholds. We looked at the other side. We looked at the people. We looked at what the sustainable tourism development look for them. And then we came out with resolutions. We had 5 conferences. We called it a National Tourism Conference, and we did speak to a lot of stakeholders. We also spoke to, let's say, for example, a stakeholder was the churches. How do churches see tourism development? To give one example of one of the stakeholders as we spoke. Maybe I don't know if archaeology was not included, but okay. I don't know the list completely, but our bad from that part. But we really dig deep, and we came about with a lot of more than 20 resolutions. But what we did was do 5 conferences, and on World Tourism Day we did a big conference where we put all the stakeholders together, and then from the Tourist Board, together with the Ministry of Economic Development, led by our minister, we and the Curaçao Hospitality and Tourism Association, CHATA, so the hospitality sector, because it's not something that we did alone from the Tourist Board. It was literally a private partnership action. And then we came about resolutions that we're going to be working on when it comes to sustainable tour development, taking into perspective and the view of the local community and not the tourism stakeholders. And from that, we initiated one of the first resolutions that was done on that day was enlisting and making a ministerial work group where it's not headed by us, it's headed by the ministers, and not only the Minister of Economic Development, Minister of Transport, Minister of Education, and all these sit together and give out direction how we're going to be implementing and resolving these resolutions and making authenticity, sustainability, and diversity of island key. Because one thing is for sure, our island, our people already said, we don't want to lose our real identity, our real authenticity, because that is what people come here and enjoy. So it is a work in progress. Maybe we need to look at the archaeological side. And heritage in general, and bring that also on board. But there is right now an official body with a national decree that was signed by the ministers to enforce this and keep maintaining this. So it is work in progress. All these are what I like to call building blocks for looking at our sustainable growth and sustainable development of our tourism industry. So that part is done, doing in carrying capacity, the hospitality sector also giving their part. So it is a collective effort from us on the island to shape where are we heading when it comes to sustainable tourism development. Yes, it's members and leaders, yes. But you cannot include 150,000 people, but you look at community leaders that have a voice when it comes to their particular communities and their particular areas. So we tried, and I believed it was 5 conferences. I don't know all the details on who are the ones that were invited, but like I said, we invited even the churches to weigh in on what they see about tourism development, how they see, the development of the island. So if we take, all these people, you cannot do 150,000 people's input. You look at, first of all, community leaders and some people of the community that voice their concerns and their input on how we need to keep on developing our tourism.
We have 3 last questions that are already
One
identified.
moment.
What's that? Just announcement. So we have 3 last questions that have identified themselves long before, just so you know. So there's no more room for questions in the interest of time, so that everyone can get a chance to answer and make a conclusion. So we have here Juan is answering a question, addressing a question that came in online, Chiquita and Madame.
Before that, can I just add very quickly another tool that you can use in addition to what the consultant use as a focus group is what we call a sentiment survey, where you go to the community at large and you try to get a more representative sample. In our case, most of the time it's about around 600, and then you go to the various barrios, the neighborhoods, and you interview them on their sentiments on the development of tourism. In addition, I was in Jamaica a couple of years ago, where I talked to the Jamaica Product Development Company. We are using almost the same kind of projects of an experiential and transformative tourism to be able to immerse the locals as well in developments.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Dino.
So I have a question that comes back to the citizen sentiments about tourism development. So maybe Mr. Daal can answer this, or Seleni with the carrying capacity. The question is, how reliable is actually the carrying capacity research if the tourism development projects that are taking place currently are being developed in segmented areas where there is no communities that are strongly settled. So when there is sentiment research being done, nobody's gonna feel actually the effects taking place, since they're living. Yeah. So maybe you guys can answer that, so I can organize my ideas.
No, I need you to, if you can, repeat the question.
I think the first one that would be also answering Seleni, because I already see her raising. Yeah.
The question is, future is research in planned to get citizen sentiment on tourist development. How reliable is this if the communities are not around the developments? They're settled away from these developments.
So the question is, how do you involve people that don't have feel the direct influence right now, and may have an opinion when it comes out to their communities later? I think, Seleni, this is definitely something that you can address. The floor is yours.
I'm sure. Happy to sort of help start the responses here, and I'm sure Dino may have additional insights. This is a really good question, right? It's, you want to make sure that you're scooping up input from a wide cross-section of the community through these resident sentiment surveys, even those communities that are a little bit far out from where development is currently occurring. We use that sort of design in bringing together, the leaders for these focus groups that were held. But I would say, that there are 2 things that I think are worth emphasizing here. One, in all the previous carrying capacities of destinations and in these dashboards that have been created, the question was like 31 indicators, what are these? They cut across all those key pillars of sustainability, and residents are a part of it. So these like 31 indicators, nearly 10 of those indicators are actually it's 11 of these indicators are primarily focused on resident input, which means that then there will be this effort to ensure that the resident sentiment surveys are occurring. These resident sentiment surveys are not common in most destinations, unfortunately. You have places that have kept up, like one of the very few places is Hawaii, another island. They have decades of data on resident sentiment and can see how, it's changed over time. So in your dashboard, monitoring, that's coming out of this carrying capacity, you will have, more than 10 of the 31 indicators coming from communities, like their input. So you just gotta make sure that when the resident survey is, put out, which I understand maybe later this year, it captures that wide cross section, including those communities where there's planned tourism coming. And this is not like all unknown. There is a pipeline of development, and there is good enough knowledge of where new developments will be coming. And so you want to make sure that you are gathering up, insights from communities, that those communities, as well as those that are feeling the intense pressure from tourism already. I hope that's helpful.
Another tool that is used,
Amy was,
yes, is town hall meetings in the various communities. That is another tool that you can use to have the input at the right moment of the various residents on the island.
Yes, thank you.
Am I to understand that this carrying capacity focuses on urban areas alone? Like, is this what I heard you say, Seleni?
No, the carrying capacity looked at the entire island overall.
Okay.
It looked at physical infrastructure through key indicators. It looked at the impacts of tourism from a socioeconomic standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, and then also from an experiential standpoint, which covered residents and visitors.
Okay.
I hope that's helpful.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Because I was wondering, because sorry, I don't remember your name. You were saying, I see, again, in my field, I see there are a lot of development going on in places where people don't live. Like a lot of places that are conservative areas,
Conservation areas.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, conservation areas. I am noticing that there is, I don't know if this is out in the open, that a lot of developers want to change this to like touristic areas, and that is a problem. Yes, they want to. I have the feeling, like in what I see come true, that there are moments. I think that because if it's a conservation area, you can do things on a conservation area, but there are rules. You have to archaeology needs to be done, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's difficult for developers, and we're talking about what the community wants. The community doesn't have any input in that. We do not have an input in that. Not even me, as an archaeologist, that would say, oh, I don't think that's a good idea because you have this of heritage in there. We have nothing to say about this, and that is an issue. I keep seeing areas that shouldn't be developed how they are being developed now. Again, I do not say shouldn't be developed, because that's a thing that people think that archaeologists don't want development. I want development, but it has to happen in a proper way. And if we're talking about input of the community, we do not have input in this. So I think that's a very, personally for me, I find that a very big problem, and it's a shame.
In the interest of time, I'm going to allow the question to be posed, but directly to someone, so we know who would you like to get an answer from.
All right. Good morning. First of all, maybe this question is a little bit more directed towards Amy, but any of you can answer. Given that Curacao is a semi-arid climate, which means we don't have a lot of rainfall, we have a hard soil, our weather is also very hard. First of all, to what extent is agriculture possible in order to even promote it? And what innovative solutions or practices can be implemented to promote sustainable agriculture on the island? So it can benefit not only the island, in order, for example, like you mentioned, in order to avoid having properties that can be used for agriculture, people are using it to build on it. So to what extent is agriculture possible, and what innovative solutions or practices can be implemented so it can benefit both the community and also the island?
Let me reiterate again, I am not a hydrologist or an
Agriculturalist?
agriculture. Sorry, my words are getting twisted. Yeah, I am just an archaeologist. But what I see, like, let's say a very quick example, when Johan van Waalbeek came to Curaçao in 1634, he was saying, this island has a lot of fruit. You see different, and he was mentioning fruits. He was mentioning fruits, and you see the indigenous people with the Spanish people that were here. They had, we had a big leather industry here also. To have a lot of these animals walking around, you had to have water, you had to have things for them to eat. And we had all of these things. Of course, not as big as other islands, but we did have all of these things. Now you barely see fruits outside. This is all the effect of what we have been doing for centuries. There is a place around Rio Canario. It, like all those areas, Asiento, Rio Canario, to the north of the refinery. That area used to be called water plantations. If you go still there now, you see very big trees. Amistad also, because the soil has a lot of water in it. Even though it's less than normal, it has a lot of water in it. The soil there, you see the soil, you see it's dark, it looks good.
Healthy.
It's not diabas. They're building stuff on it.
Yep.
Royen, we have many roys. We're destroying them, we're building things in them. That's what we're doing. So again, I'm not an expert in how to plant and how to deal with water. I'm just telling you what I see from the history up to now and what we're still doing. And it's like we didn't learn our lesson. And it's sad to see, because I also do not know how to tell people, hey, look at this. So that is what I can give my experience that I look from the past.
The word is at Chiquita.
Okay, hi. I have a question, and I think it's towards Seleni and Dino. Okay, yes. My question is directed to Seleni and Dino. It has to do with the indicators. We have been talking about residents' sentiment, the importance of authenticity and all of that. But if I look at the indicators that you've presented, or you have a sheet, and I see that the indicators that have to do with the social impact are far less. So I'm wondering how that is going to be used in the tourism carrying capacity, or if you guys will, if there will be weighted to increase their importance, because just the number of it is far less than the economic and other indicators that you guys have used.
Yes, Seleni, this question I think is one that you can answer the best, or you're best equipped to answer.
Thank you. So in the set of 31 indicators, there are, like I mentioned, like over like 11 or 12 that are focused on residents. And within these indicators, there's several that give feedback on how residents feel tourism is doing, and how well it is promoting the protection of culture and heritage. That's one, for instance. There's another indicator that measures how communities feel tourism is impacting the environment. There's another indicator that focuses as well on how they feel about overcrowding, and what residents' perceptions are in terms of tourism and overcrowding. There's an additional indicator that even takes that further to understand how residents are feeling about their access to amenities and facilities related to tourism. So these are some of like the very specific questions of the insights that we hope would add important insights to the overall snapshot of how residents are feeling about tourism. In addition to those tourism intensity indicators that look at visitor to resident ratio, or for instance hotel rooms per 100 residents, or even then visitors by square kilometers. So there's a wide range. I would say, like, compared to other dashboards, this is one of the first dashboards globally that has such a large segment of the indicators being resident focused. So that's like a big contribution already to like global dialogue in Curaçao selecting a large share of the 31 indicators being focused on community input and perceptions.
If I may compliment shortly, this information is not static. Muryad referred to the conference that was held on World Tourism Day. I can imagine that the results, some of these results at least, we could discuss at the second conference, and if necessary, add more indicators that have to do with the social dimension. But also, during the town hall meetings or the sentiment survey, you can always add more, let's say, aspects to the survey that would include more of the social dimension. So it's something that is dynamic, and during the course of time, we can add as much as possible to get a more representative idea or perception of the social indicator.
Ms. Match.
Okay. I have a little quick comment and then a quick question. Progress is a process, and boy, do I know that because of Demo and Punda. Punda and Demo, after yesterday's inspiring presentations, I went home and I thought about what you and I spoke about as well. And I was reflecting on our progress with Punda and Demo. Key challenge remains local resistance to change, often due to limited information and lack of inclusion. But now after this, I would like to add education. Because eigenlijk what you were saying, Amy, I had no clue. And I've lived here my entire life. But I do think you're not doing a good job by communicating that with us or the community itself. You know, not you in particular, I'm saying gewoon in general. But education and communication is key for us to know this as a community. Lego my policymakers. As DMO leads Punda into a new vision, we must move at a pace that brings the community along. That this transformation honors our heritage while embracing a more future-focused direction, which we want to avoid different presentations yesterday, like the Kaya Kaya one. We need to go at pace, not too fast, because you see what happens when you go too fast, you get some consequences, like with that festival, for example. Tourism isn't the issue. Local engagement is. To ensure real progress, we need to educate, communicate, and bring people along on our process. Given the heritage and culture were the highest related by Ms. Seleni's presentation today, this is for Muryad and perhaps the CTB group. Perhaps it's a good idea to sit with Willemstad now and start developing different experiences and products in Willemstad and Punda itself. We have so much right in our hands, but I don't think we know exactly how we need to do that. And perhaps it could be like a private, public kind of relationship, now that we're asking CTB to fund everything, not at all, but help us to make this happen perhaps. Because like you say, we have our heritage, we have so much in Punda and in Willemstad, but we don't even know it ourselves.
Yep.
And I think we can create different experiences pretty short term to handle the capacity of tourists that are coming into Punda, because we also have capacity issues as well when it comes to that. And we want locals to be in Punda. Our problem are not tourists, they come. But why are the locals not coming? Because of education and communication.
Thank you. Muryad, if you want to answer to that.
No, for us, having a close relationship with Punda, being in Punda, our offices as well.
Yeah.
No, it's a part of the development of tourism in its totality, and looking at the island and our assets and how we can include the local community when it comes to tourism development and our local areas when it comes to tourism development. What you spoke about is actually opportunities, and we talk about, I think, the Jamaican lady spoke about working in the sector. Of course, working is nice in the sector. It's very straightforward working. But the opportunity lies for our local community is developing new businesses in the community, developing, being entrepreneurs when it comes to tourism, to the tourism industry. And that's also, I believe, this industry stimulates, because we're quick to say, everything comes from big investors abroad. I would challenge our local community to, hey, look at what you can do as well when it comes to, becoming entrepreneur. We know that our nation, by default, is not directly a nation of entrepreneurs, but hey, it's a challenge for us to look at the opportunities and make that work. Not only sitting and saying, hey, everything comes from international investors, but what are we doing as a community ourselves to look into possibilities of becoming also entrepreneurs and looking at unique ideas? Because I must say, copying the same thing over and over again is not also what the way to go. In everything I say, we have enough car rentals of Curaçao. Why do we need more? There are a lot of different and other experiences that are available for you as a local community to grab and to do. Just be creative. Just be creative, and believe me, and innovative, and believe me, the pie is big enough, and the pie needs more new things to enjoy and experience on the island. So yes, when it comes to Punda, of course we are having a conversation, but it's about Willemstad in its totality, but it's all about this island in its totality.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a nice closure, Muryad, because let's give everyone a round of applause. Each contribution looking at a different aspect of how to answer this big question, what is progress? I would like to end with a very short one, because we're now about to visit some of the opportunities and challenges that we face. 2 years ago, I took on this challenge to moderate this panel, so it's been 2 years in the planning, and you finish exactly where I want to continue. I'm an entrepreneurship scholar myself, and this is exactly the question I want to continue asking. How do we make it visual, possible, accessible, actionable for the regular person on the island to see, hey, there's an opportunity in this, let's see how we do it in a responsible way. I think we're going to see a few options to this today and later today. We'll also have our dinner. So it's a nice conclusion of our field trip. Tomorrow we'll be talking about all of these inner workshops. Thank you very much, all of those present in a virtual session. My apologies for cutting some people off because of time interest, but that's part of my job today. A pleasure is all mine, and we hope to see you very, very soon. Masha danki.
So I'll just add one more thing. The bus is outside now, so we'll continue taking this conversation on the road to see the practical implications in Curaçao. Head to the bathroom if you need to quickly before we all pile onto the bus.
Yes. Huh? A special thank you for Seleni for being there virtually.
Thank you so much, Guido. Hi.
Thank
bye.
you.
Come soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Hi.
Ik ben er.
Sorry, you got to speak English with me. I'm useless. Sorry.